Sure, here's a 500-word story built around the topic: the surprising effects on the prostate when older men relieve themselves daily, framed in an engaging, informative, and respectful narrative style. Frank's routine: a surprising path to prostate health. Frank Reynolds was a no-nonsense kind of guy. At 68, the retired mechanic valued routine. He walked his dog every morning, read the newspaper with his coffee, and prided himself on keeping his health in check. But when he began waking up several times a night to use the bathroom, he knew something wasn't quite right. His doctor ran the usual tests: blood work, prostate exam, a PSA test. Thankfully, nothing alarming showed up, but his physician gave him a piece of advice that made Frank raise an eyebrow. "Frank," Dr. Harris said with a smile, "it might sound odd, but regular ejaculation, yes, even at your age, can actually benefit your prostate health." Frank chuckled. "Is that your way of prescribing me a good time?" "Not just for fun," the doctor replied. "There's growing evidence that relieving yourself regularly helps flush out the prostate, reducing inflammation, lowering the risk of prostate cancer, and improving urinary flow." That night, Frank did a little digging on his own. He found research from reputable sources backing the claim. Older men who ejaculated more frequently, about 21 times a month, were statistically less likely to develop prostate cancer. Beyond that, regular release seemed to help reduce congestion in the prostate and ease pressure on the bladder. What really stood out to Frank was how often men his age suffered in silence. He'd never once discussed this with his friends, but as he thought about it, he realized how common prostate issues were. Some of his buddies talked about enlarged prostates, weak flow, discomfort, but no one ever mentioned this particular form of prevention. He decided to take it seriously, not obsessively, but as a regular part of his wellness routine. And after a few weeks, he noticed a difference. He slept better at night, his trips to the bathroom became less urgent, and his energy was up. At his next appointment, Dr. Harris grinned when Frank walked in. "You were right," Frank said. "Who knew staying active in that department could make such a difference?" "Most men don't," the doctor replied. "But the prostate is a gland, and like any other part of the body, it benefits from being used and cared for." Frank didn't turn into an evangelist, but he did start sharing what he'd learned with his closest friends, discreetly, over a round of golf or during coffee. The response surprised him: curiosity, relief, even gratitude. One friend admitted he'd been struggling and never thought something so natural could help. It wasn't about obsession or chasing youth. It was about understanding how the male body works and how aging doesn't mean giving up on your own care. For Frank, the solution wasn't in a pill or a procedure. It was in a deeper connection with his own body. Sometimes the most surprising health habits are the ones no one talks about. And for men like Frank, that simple truth turned out to be life-changing. Would you like a 2-sentence summary of this turned into a voiceover? Let me know your preferred voice. Of course. Here's a 500-word continuation of Frank's story, digging deeper into how this new knowledge influenced not just his health, but also his mindset and community. Frank's newfound understanding didn't just affect his prostate health. It quietly transformed his outlook on aging. For years, he had assumed that certain parts of life simply faded with time. He never talked about intimacy or physical release with anyone, not even during his marriage. It had always been a private matter, and after his wife passed, he'd quietly accepted that those days were behind him. But what began as a doctor's suggestion slowly became a catalyst for redefining what it meant to take care of himself, body and mind. This wasn't about chasing old thrills. It was about respecting the simple mechanics of health. The prostate, after all, wasn't just some abstract organ. It was part of him, and taking care of it meant being willing to confront awkward truths. With his doctor's support and some good old-fashioned research, Frank began making small, sustainable changes. He added more zinc-rich foods like pumpkin seeds and spinach to his diet, started drinking more water, and carved out time to relax and relieve stress. Because he learned stress could tighten pelvic muscles and aggravate prostate symptoms. But the most personal change was his commitment to regular ejaculation, whether through solo care or intimacy. He didn't force it or feel ashamed. It was simply part of a well-rounded wellness routine. As the months passed, the results were noticeable. His sleep improved, his urinary issues became less frequent, and he even felt mentally sharper. But more than anything, Frank felt empowered. Aging, he realized, didn't mean surrendering parts of yourself. It meant learning how to support your body in new ways, on new terms. This new perspective gave him the courage to bring up the topic at his men's health group, a monthly gathering at the community center where guys his age talked about everything from back pain to blood pressure. Frank was nervous at first. "It's not easy to bring this up," he said, "but I wish someone had told me sooner." Then he explained what he'd learned about the prostate, the studies on frequent ejaculation, and the changes he'd felt in his own body. To his surprise, the room didn't go quiet with discomfort. It buzzed with curiosity. Questions poured out, some serious, some joking, but all real. One man said he thought those days were over for him. Another admitted he was too embarrassed to ask his doctor. Frank shared resources, and they laughed about how it took a group of gray-haired guys to finally talk about this stuff openly. The conversation didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, Frank got calls from several group members, thanking him for breaking the ice. Some had already noticed improvements. One man told Frank he felt 10 years younger. Frank wasn't a doctor, but he was living proof that even topics considered taboo could be essential parts of health and vitality. And he had learned something vital. Aging isn't about giving things up. It's about paying attention, staying informed, and taking action. Because sometimes the key to lasting health is simply knowing what not to ignore. Want help turning part of this into a voiceover line? Let me know. Certainly. Here's a 200-word paragraph that continues and gently wraps up Frank's story with a hopeful and empowering tone. As the seasons passed, Frank noticed that he wasn't just feeling better physically. He was more confident, more connected to himself. He walked taller, smiled more, and began to see aging not as a decline, but as a shift in how he engaged with his body and health. He no longer felt awkward about the routines he'd adopted. They were simply part of taking care of himself, the same way he brushed his teeth or stretched his legs each morning. His openness also deepened his relationships with friends, with his sons, and eventually with a woman he met at the senior center named Diane. They shared long walks, good conversation, and yes, a renewed sense of closeness that neither had expected at this stage of life. Frank felt grateful. What started as a doctor's passing comment had led to a deeper, richer life. He often told others, "Don't be afraid to care for every part of yourself. That's not weakness, it's wisdom." And as he looked ahead to the years to come, he knew he wasn't just preserving his health. He was preserving his dignity, joy, and quality of life. One honest conversation had changed everything, and he hoped others would find the courage to start their own. Let me know if you'd like a short voiceover summary from this.